will move next to a presentation by Tom Zuber regarding the 2021-22 audit. So, sir, it's to
Can
you.
you hear me okay? I can go up in front if you'd like, or I can sit here, whatever you...
Well, if you're comfortable there.
All right. Well, good. Thank you very much for inviting me here tonight. You should have received in your board packets a copy of the basic financial statements, which is a fairly thick document. Included in that is the letter of communication. In addition, you should have received an internal control communication, which is the smaller of the two reports. And I'm pleased to say that we've completed the audit of the financial statements, and that the village continues to be in good financial condition. And these financial statements really, they're a result of a budget process that you started really probably more than 2 years ago, right? If these are the 2022 financial statements, and these really are the end results of that budget, okay? And in that big thick document, I'll give a few overviews or highlights of the basic financial statements, but if you have any questions on anything within the financial statements, feel free to stop me and ask, and I'll try to react to those questions. But overall, the basic financial statements, there are a couple different key components within there. Obviously, our audit opinion, which is unqualified, no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies. That's really what you're looking for in the audit of the basic financial statements. That's the standard opinion. But within the document, too, there's this document called the Management Discussion and Analysis, and that's on page 3 through 12, and that's really a nice summary of the different financial activity that took place during the year. So there's some financial highlights, there's some summary financial information, there's some discussion on budget variances. There's also a quick discussion on factors that will impact the village going forward. And again, the intent of that document is if you were to read through that, you'd have a fairly good idea of what took place during the year. And that's a nice document, and management puts that together as part of the financial reporting package. And then we get into the numbers piece as we get into the basic financial statements. And if you recall, in the past, there's two different financial statements. There's that corporate style financial statement, okay, and that's where we consolidate all of your operating funds, so your general fund, your parks fund, your capital project fund, and then we include all of your capital assets and related long-term obligations, okay? And finally, you get into the operating statements. So there's a lot of good information in the financial statements, but overall, I think I just wanted to give a few brief highlights when it comes to the overall operating statements, which really primarily is the general fund. Okay, we'll make a few comments on the sewer fund when we talk a little bit about that. But overall, page 15 of the basic financial statements really is that snapshot of the general fund. And when we look at the financial condition of the village, we really focus on the bottom half of the page, the equity section. And you can see the overall total equities were about $2.8 million in the general fund as of, or a little over $2.8 million in the general fund as of May 31st, 2022. And you can see there's a couple different components of that. There's the non-spendable fund balance, there's restricted fund balance, assigned fund balance, and then the unassigned fund balance, okay? And you can see the non-spendable really represents the long-term loan, or the loan between the sewer fund and the general fund. And then you have your restricted funds, which really are those reserves. So as you know, you have a reserve for debt payments, okay, about $43,000 of that number. You've got a capital reserve, which is about $275,000, as well as a retirement reserve. So couple reserves there in those restricted dollars. The assigned fund balance, that's really encumbrances, so dollars that you've committed to but you haven't actually spent yet, okay? And then that unassigned fund balance, just over $2 billion. That really is there for operational purposes. And overall, the fund balance from last year to this year did increase about $650,000, okay? Which is fairly consistent with what we've seen in other municipalities. You know, the end of this year, really you got from May 2020 or June 1st, 2021 through May 31st, 2022. So obviously still in that COVID time period, and just and fairly consistent with every single other municipality we work with. You know, you did end the year in very good financial condition. There are a couple of unique things that took place this year. One of the areas is in the sales tax, right? Sales tax continues to be exceptionally strong with municipalities. You know, we continue to monitor that. Municipalities continue to monitor that. Because where will that continue to move in? And as you know, with inflation, the numbers have still been fairly strong from the sales tax returns. So again, that's something I think a lot of folks didn't expect to happen. One of the key reasons for that, though, is right about the beginning of the pandemic, there was this little law that went into place that the governor at the time had put in place regarding the taxation of internet sales. Okay, so that's really the reason, one of the major reasons why we see the strength in the sales tax numbers is because of the fact that something that was never taxed before is now being taxed. Okay, so that continues to be why we see the strong sales. Really, it's primarily the internet sales. Okay, the other argument is on your spending plans, right? And consistent, I think, with many other municipalities. Because of that period of uncertainty with COVID, there are quite a few different projects and things that the village really didn't begin, primarily roads and sidewalk construction in a major area. And again, as the village board really made some very positive decisions and saying, let's wait and see what really happens during this period of uncertainty. So, you know, I think those are some of the reasons why we see the very positive financial returns at the end of 2022. And again, as you move forward and you're doing some of those projects that you didn't get to in the past, I think you'll continue to monitor that. But overall, again, at the end of the year in very good financial position. Overall, general fund equity went up about $650,000, so I'll continue to monitor that. Okay. The other major fund really of the village ends up being the sewer fund, which is a business type activity. All right, and you can see that on page 18. Really, we'll just look at that snapshot. And again, the sewer fund being a business type activity, we include within that fund all of the different capital assets as well as all of the long-term obligations. And the one unique part about that fund is that when you look at the year-end fund balance, you see a negative $1.2 million. When you look at your overall ending equities in your sewer fund. And the challenge with that, unlike the governmental fund, unlike the general fund, the sewer fund has to recognize certain long-term obligations. And one of the biggest long-term obligation relates to retiree health insurance, in which the village has to go out and identify or obtain an actuary. And they come in and they look at all of the contracts you have in place and they identify how much of a benefit, a health insurance benefit, are you offering your retirees. Okay, and this calculation is done. The total town-wide or village-wide obligation is about $4.8 million. Okay, and then the sewer fund's share is about $1.4 million. Okay, so the challenge when you look at this presentation, that negative number really is because you have this liability, this retiree health obligation that you had to set money aside for, okay? And so that's why you see that negative number there. It's really as a result of that calculation, okay? And so if you were to take that out, okay, which is about $1.4 million, you end up seeing about a positive $200,000 in that business type activity. So, you know, when you look at it on the surface, it looks like there's a negative number there, but when you kind of factor in this long-term retiree health obligation, it kind of brings it back around to a positive $200,000. And again, with the retiree health, the way that the village operates is you budget, you're on a pay-as-you-go basis, okay? So if your retiree obligation is $100,000, you pay $100,000 for those health insurance obligations, okay? This is just an accounting transaction that we have to do when it comes to the reporting of this particular fund, and that's why you see that adjustment. And that retiree health number, what they're doing is they're taking and looking at the contracts and saying, this is the commitment we've made for these employees based on the contracts, right? And they have to look at how long those individuals will live, and they bring it back to a present value, okay? And that's why that number is so large, okay? So that's really the only unusual item when you look at it in the financial statements on the surface. It looks a little unique, but when you really pull it apart a little bit, it brings it back down to the sewer operations at about positive $200,000, okay? So again, those are the key financial items within the basic financial statements. We also issued an internal control communication, which we used to call the management letter, but it's internal control related matters, part of identified during the audit. Again, as part of any audit process, we come in and we sit down with your staff and we really document the different processes and procedures that you have over the different financial cycles. So we'll take a look at your payroll processes and procedures and how do employees report times on their time cards, and then how does that get communicated into the finance department and entered into the system, and all of the different checks and balances over that payroll process. And again, I'm pleased to report no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, so that's very positive. The items in the letter, just some minor procedural items relating to some of the checks and balances. Again, nothing significant. So again, just some minor procedural recommendations for the village board to consider going forward. Okay. There was one item that was talked about in the prior year that was corrected. So again, that's very positive from the audit standpoint. Shows that you're reacting to recommendations from the external auditor. So again, I think overall, very, very positive financial results. I know this was the first time through the audit with us, and I really do appreciate the finance department. Anytime you're coming in and you've got some change, can be a little more difficult, but I thought the audit went very smoothly, and really the information was provided to us very timely. Unfortunately, with all of our June 30th and May 31st audits, we have to wait on the state to give us certain financial information relating to the pension system, and that really ends up being why we can't finish the reports. That information was released sometime in late August, and then after we have to get it blended into the financial statements and so forth. So, okay. Again, overall very positive. Certainly happy to react to any questions you have.
Any recommendations that we can do that better?
Well, I think in the internal control communications, we talked about a few minor procedural items just to make sure that you're looking at your different checks and balances and enhancing those checks and balances. But you do have a very strong business finance department that really does a good job in terms of the current procedural items that you have. And again, that's what we do when we come into the audit. We understand and have to understand what checks and balances you have in place, and are you following those checks and balances, okay? And then as we go through that process, we will make recommendations for best practice, okay? And, some are just kind of general minor recommendations, and, I don't think we had anything significant in terms of that process, okay? But overall, again, you're doing a very good job.
Thanks, ladies.
Very nice.
What's that?
Very nice work, Marcia.
Thank you very much. It's been really great working with Tom. I'm very happy with everything.
Good. I'm glad that this first year went well. And good. Pleased with the result myself.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't have any particular questions. I've kind of been through this as much.
Now we gotta get straightened out with the sewer fund.
I can give you a year-to-date, an update on like the sewer debt and all that stuff, probably the first meeting in January.
Good, I'm gonna see it.
Yeah, it's weird when you're looking at these documents that are, what, 6, 7 months old. A lot has happened since then.
Yeah, I know, that. Yeah.
Good shape. Okay.
Good, thank you, Tom.
I appreciate your
I respect that. Good.
comments and good report. Thank you.
So, I thought we paid that off.
We did in July.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Scared me when I saw that.